I am Arnaud Loret, I'm architect at AXA Bank. It's an online French bank. AXA Bank is a subsidiary of the AXA Insurance Group. I'm also known as the API Handyman. You can follow me on Twitter. I write as time permits on my blog, apihandyman.io, and some other websites. I'm also running a website called apistartgroup.com. It's a website in which I'm trying together all available API design guidelines. And what an amazing coincidence. The Lord of API designs I'm talking about today is API design guidelines. When you design anything, you must be aware of a terrible and ancient evil lurking in the dark. From door design to kitchen appliance design to API design, this terrible and ancient evil can totally screw up the best design intentions. How could this be possible? How the best API design could be a total failure? Let's see that through a story which started well. After a long struggle, an API designer found a way into the REST API design maze and succeeded to achieve the design of a quite decent API. But APIs are not meant to stay frozen for eternity. They are living things. They will change and evolve. So, after a few months, this first API has to be updated to add some new features. And I don't really get it, but there is something different with this new version of the API. Did you notice it? And have you ever realized that if there are thousands of public APIs out there, there are millions of private ones? Yes, millions. If any company in the world built a mobile application and its backend, that's millions of APIs. And just think about all this company going crazy about microservices, that's millions of APIs. So whatever the purpose, there are more and more APIs designed every day, every hour, even inside a single organization, a single company. And what can happen when in an organization someone designs a new API? This second API is created to cover some totally different use case from the first one, but still I have this awkward feeling when I look at this API design. There is something strange, something different from the previous one, but I cannot put my finger on it yet. And the next one gives me this same feeling, and the one after that too, and whoa, this one is really creepy. But what is the source of this strange and disturbing feeling when you look at all these APIs provided by a single organization? Let's take a closer look to find out. All these APIs may use different URL patterns. They may use different keys in property names, they may use different names for the same thing, and they may use different data formats. And these are only a few examples of differences in API design. The possibilities are endless. URL patterns, naming conventions for properties and URL keys, data structures, security, parameters, the use of HTTP method, HTTP status codes, how you handle errors, how the API behaves globally. So much differences, too much differences. All these API designs are inconsistent. All these APIs can be inconsistent from each other, and even a single API can be inconsistent within itself, using different URL patterns from an endpoint to another or different keys for properties. So, okay. APIs provided by an organization for public or private purposes can have inconsistent designs. So what? What is the problem of having inconsistent API designs? It's quite simple, but with terrible consequences. Why do you almost always know how to open a door? because its design is usually consistent with other doors you have encountered before. Thanks to this design consistency, you will know how to open a door almost instinctively. But what happens when you encounter a door which design is totally different from other doors you have encountered before? You are puzzled. You have to discover how to use this door. Everything you have learned before may be useless when using this inconsistent door. And it is exactly the same with APIs. One does not simply use inconsistent APIs. Using inconsistent APIs requires too much effort. Once users have mastered one API's endpoint, they expect the next one to behave and look the same way. Once users have mastered an API from an organization, they expect the next API to behave and look just like the previous one. Having to relearn everything when passing from one endpoint or one API to another is annoying, time-consuming, and source of error. It's so annoying and time-consuming that users will hate you for that. Writing code using consistent APIs is so easy. Writing code using inconsistent APIs is a total burden. If users have the choice, they will choose to not use your inconsistent APIs at all. They will choose some other ones which will be consistent and far more easy to understand and use. So yes, inconsistent APIs are terrible. Inconsistency means time lost. Inconsistency means customers lost, and inconsistency means money lost. And can this nightmare be the work of a single person? Definitely. A single API designer can perfectly create very well-designed APIs which are totally inconsistent. Inconsistent within themselves, but also with other APIs previously designed. All this by simply forgetting, consciously or not, what has been done previously. But things can get even worse than when there are more API designers involved. The number of inconsistency problems we can have with a single designer is multiplied by the number of API designers, and new type of problem arise. API designers love to talk. API designers never agree on anything. I'm sure that if I ask 10 API designers what is the best way to handle pagination, for example, I will get more than 10 responses, and we could debate endlessly to select a so-called good solution. And the funny thing is that once a solution is found, API designers will have this same discussion again and again for the next and the next API. And when API designers do not talk to each other, they love to reinvent the wheel on their own, a wheel that has probably just been created by one of their fellow API designers. And of course, this wheel is totally inconsistent with the previous one. It could be how to handle pagination or batch processing or errors or whatever API design that needs to be solved one day or another for any API. All these different solutions may be valid separately, but together they deeply trouble the organization's API surface. So the more APIs, the more inconsistency, the more API designers, the more inconsistency. All API designers losing time thinking again and again about the same things. This is terrible. Terrible for users, terrible for designers, and terrible for the organization providing these inconsistent APIs. Is there a way to avoid this evil and ancient inconsistency demon? Yes, there is a solution. It is called an API style guide, API guidelines, or API design guides, or whatever name. It is something that describes the rules that must be followed when designing APIs within an organization. These rules will be mainly about the API itself. How should the API look and behave URL patterns, how to use HTTP method, HTTP status codes, what are the naming conventions, how to handle errors, etc., etc. This style guide can also contain guidelines about how to design APIs, which method or process use, the steps each API designer should follow, the tools to use. An important topic which might be described in a style guide is how to update an API, what should be considered a breaking change or not, how to create APIs which will lessen the pain of updating them. Such style guide can also, at an extent, talk about the whole API lifecycle, when and why to create API, how to handle updates, how many versions to keep alive at a time, how long all versions are kept, how to handle subset, how to warn users, how much time should we let them before shutting down the API. You put in an API style guide every rules that you need to ensure consistency in API design, but also API lifecycle or whatever API related subject. These rules are discussed once, and after that API designers won't lose time anymore. Whether they are seasoned or beginners one, they can focus on what's really important. Think about the real problem to solve without having to think about petty details like, oh, which HTTP status should I use when there's a user's error? Which case should I use in property names or URLs? These rules being applied across all organizations' APIs, there won't be inconsistency anymore. And all users and API designers will be happy forever and ever. Is that really so simple? We just put rules in a book and all our API design problems are gone? Sorry, but it's not that simple. First, you have to write the guidelines. What will you put in them? How to define rules? How to describe them? You may simply analyze your existing APIs and also take famous APIs as example to define your design rules, like Stripes, or Trio, or other famous ones. You may also copy-paste or take inspiration from existing API design guidelines that you can find on apistylebook.com. That's a shameless plug. And don't forget to talk to your fellow API designers because they may give you some useful advice and they also will have to use these guidelines. And remember that these people love to debate endlessly. So, that was not so hard. The API design guidelines has been written. The job is done. Or you think it is. Writing guidelines is only the beginning. What do you think can happen if you write a book full of rules and put it on a shelf? Nothing. Nobody will read it. And if nobody reads this guide, what will happen? Inconsistency in API design, all this work done for nothing. So, you will have to find any possible means to share and promote this API design style guide. You can create a website on your internal developer portal, create funny stickers, posters, do training sessions, in short, sell your style guide. Make people aware of it, make people understand it, make people love it, just like any product. Now, everyone is aware that the API design style guide exists, but you will discover that, if it's working, it needs to evolve. An API style guide may not be completely exhaustive at first try, and this is completely normal. You'll need to update it because some designers may find some new use case that was not covered by the existing style guides, and so the new rules need to be included in the style guides in order to avoid people reinventing the wheel and add inconsistency in the API surface. And also, the way rules are described may not be efficient, like in any tutorial or any documentation. You will have to find the good way to make people understand what you want. So an API style guide must be a living thing that anyone can contribute to by updating it to add new feature or improve it to make it more understandable. And once it is updated, you have, of course, to share and promote this new version. Okay, we have written rules with our fellow API designers based on existing APIs or API guidelines. We share them, we promote them, and we are able to update them and improve them. What do we miss? There is one last thing which is terribly important. Rules can be broken. Some people may not follow the rules, consciously or not. Therefore, you will have to enforce the use of guidelines and control that they are actually applied. This control can be done by people using peer review, for example. But some organizations try to automate control on API design. If machines are not yet fully capable of evaluating the accuracy of an API design to solve a problem, they are totally capable to check some API design basic rules as long as they have something that they can work with. And such thing exists. The Open API Initiative is an organization which promotes a machine-readable API description format called the Open API Specification. With the Open API Specification, you can fully describe an API in a YAML file. It's text with indentation. You can describe path, HTTP methods, request bodies, response bodies, status codes, everything. And such format can perfectly and easily be parsed by some program to check if the API, which is described in this file, conforms to the rules that you have edicted for your guidelines. Rules such as mandatory HTTP status codes, URL patterns, correct use of types, respect of naming conventions, data structure, etc., etc. Thanks to my work on API stylebook, I have discovered while I was analyzing Zalando's guidelines that they had created a tool called Zali. They say it's a minimalistic API linter, but there is so much work behind this tool that I wouldn't dare to call it minimalistic. This tool comes with a server and a web UI. Using the tool, you can check Open API files remotely using their URL and also copy-paste them in an editor. And when rules are broken, they are shown to you in a report. And you can have direct links to the rule definition in the API design guidelines. Therefore, you have some clues to fix your API design to conform to a style described in the guidelines. Not that the server exposes an API. There is also a CLI, a command line interface, which rely on the server, and all this tooling can be integrated into continuous integration systems or API designer tools. And of course, you can modify the rules so they can match your own guidelines. This is great, but do such tools can help us get rid of humans in the API design control process? Of course not. Such tool can be of great help, but the last line of defense against poor API design, against inconsistency is still humanity. Only a human being will be able to evaluate if an API design is really beautiful, user-friendly, and accurate. But not having to care about basic API design rules is really cool, so we can focus on what's really important, where human beings have real value. It's time to finish this story. What should we remember? First, so-called good API design is nothing without consistency. If 3 individual endpoints within a single API are perfectly designed but are inconsistent with each other, it's a failure. If an organization exposes a too much trouble API surface, it is a failure. API design cannot be consistent without clearly defined rules. If there are no rules, be ready to face the API design Far West, with ruthless and lawless API designers creating totally inconsistent APIs. Defining rules is nothing if nobody is aware of them, nor accept them, nor follow them. Establishing rules, sharing them, update them, improve them, and control them, all this requires governance. And I'm not talking about dumb police from the SOR era. I'm talking about something like designer relations, training, coaching people, promoting a product, provide tools that make this control smooth and effortless. So all this is only possible thanks to people. So it's time to build your fellowship of API designers to be sure to design consistent and beautiful APIs and provide a perfect and smooth API surface for your organization. Thank you very much.